I think Zach Wilson is going to be in the discussion and as one of the top 3 to 5 quarterbacks very quickly. Within the next couple of years, I think you're going to see him rise. I think he's unbelievable. His ceiling is so high, it's rare for me to say someone has the ability to get in the stratosphere of a Mahomes. Sit down, Nick. But I think this kid actually has that ability. So when you have a quarterback like that, I think there's no telling how good you can be. Broussard, what did you make of Romo's comments?
Well, I know that everyone thinks Tony Romo can do, think, say, utter no wrong right now. They've called him a football genius since he's retired and become this great broadcaster. This reminds me of going back to 2013 when another guy that I think is incredibly intelligent about football, former quarterback Ron Jaworski, you know where I'm going, Nick. He said Colin Kaepernick was going to be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And we all know, of course, Kaepernick's not in the league for different reasons, but even before he began kneeling and worked his way out of the league, it was clear he wasn't going to be an all-time great quarterback. So this is just premature. And I like Zach Wilson. And so I do think he can be good. I think he's the best quarterback the Jets have drafted in a long time. However, to say top 3 or 5, just keep Mahomes' name out of your mouth. Don't ever put a rookie who hasn't thrown an NFL pass in the same sentence as Pat Mahomes. That said, I'll give Romo this, Nick. When you realize, okay, Tom Brady's 44, he'll be retiring at some point. Aaron Rodgers is about to be 38 in December. Deshaun Watson, his future is in flux. Okay, that takes out 3 of the top 5 already. So if Zach Wilson really is good, okay, maybe he can somehow be in that discussion. But I think it's just premature, Nick.
No. Of course it's premature. Here's the thing. Zach Wilson, in order to be top 3, so Mahomes is already there. So then you got to be better than everyone else in the league except for one guy. Right? And who's the guy? Russell Wilson, he's still pretty young. Dak Prescott, he's young. You like Lamar, he's won an MVP. Some people love Josh Allen. If Deshaun Watson ever comes back to football and gets everything sorted out, he's been excellent throughout his career. But forget those guys. How about 2 AFC quarterbacks drafted in the last year and a half? Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert. I would be shocked if Zach Wilson is ever better than either of those 2 young AFC quarterbacks. And that's not a knock on him. It just, Herbert was spectacular last year. And Trevor Lawrence, I believe all the hype. There's a reason that there was no discussion about the number 1 pick, only about the number 2 pick. So how are you going to be a top 3 quarterback in the league when I don't think you ever have a shot at being a top 3 quarterback in the AFC? Forget Baker, Lamar, Josh Allen. Throw them all out. Mahomes, Herbert, and Lawrence will, I believe, be better than Zach Wilson their whole careers. That's just the AFC. So I get it, Romo. Jets, AFC team, CBS, AFC, some Jets games on TV. I understand. He's doing his job. Good for him.
But, Nick, what is more likely? Cam Newton plays or doesn't play this season?
Oh, I'm leaning towards doesn't play, and for a number of reasons. And that list of odds, those top 5 teams, I feel like I can just cross out 4 of them, and maybe all 5. Cam's not going to the Texans, and that's not because the Texans wouldn't take him. It's because I don't think Cam wants to sign up to be a part of what might be one of the worst football teams ever. That doesn't help him. So I would cross them off. Washington and Baltimore, I talked about this yesterday, and I know people might get tired of hearing about it, but I think the vaccination status almost eliminates him from those 2 teams. Ron Rivera is a cancer survivor who's talked about the importance of vaccinations more than any coach maybe at all this offseason. And Baltimore, Lamar's already unvaccinated, so you really wouldn't have the insurance if Lamar misses time. So then you have Indy. Forget what Chris Ballard came out and said yesterday about vaccinations. Set that aside. What do we know about Carson Wentz? You can't. You're not really allowed to bring in competition, even if it's just as a backup. It messes with him. So that's 4 of the 5 gone. So then there is the Cowboys, who, and Broussard, I know you're high on that, and he obviously is a better option than any of their 2 backups. But I will reference what Jerry Jones said on the radio last week when he was like, listen, everyone's entitled to their own personal health decisions, but at some point we got to put the we ahead of the me, meaning if it's for the greater good. So he seems to be leaning heavily and hard into his players being vaccinated. I don't think you can just cross out the Cowboys like you can 4 of the other 5. The one team, Broussard, that's not in the top 5 that I think might make sense other than Tampa, like Wilds talked about yesterday, is Seattle. There would be no quarterback controversy because Russ is obviously entrenched. Pete Carroll has brought in, big personalities before, and their backup right now is Geno Smith. The problem from Cam's perspective is Russell Wilson never misses games, doesn't miss snaps, and so you really wouldn't be signing up to play most likely. But no, I think it's more likely than not that Cam is not on a team this year.
All right, Nick, as much as I think there are places that make sense, I think Seattle, that was a good suggestion by you. Obviously, I brought up Dallas earlier. Lamar, backing up Lamar in Baltimore would fit. And I love Kevin Wild's suggestion yesterday about Tampa Bay. I mean, I think that makes all the sense in the world. But with all of that said, I still am with you, Nick, in that I don't think he's playing this year. Even though it makes sense, I don't think he's playing. Number one, and you brought it up, the vaccination. All right, if he didn't get vaccinated for Bill Belichick with a chance to start, why in the world, what makes us think he's going to go get vaccinated for some other situation? And I can't imagine why a team would bring in an unvaccinated backup. It just doesn't make sense. So I think that's a huge thing. But even if he gets vaccinated, remember, before June of 2020, when the Patriots signed Cam, there was no interest. None. And you brought up Washington with Ron Rivera and the cancer situation and how obviously that doesn't make sense with Cam being unvaccinated. But let's face it, Nick, Ron Rivera could have signed Cam last year.
Yes.
When all this wasn't even an issue and he has no interest. Yep. So I just think for several reasons. One, look, Cam was 15 starts.
Square-jawed, great-looking Zach Wilson. Let's see him play a bit for his top 3, top 5. Come on, Jenna.
Nick, Zach Wilson, thicker neck. That's your thing. That's your bar. Let's head to Vegas.
Not so much. It's a concern, Jenna. It's a concern.
Not so much neck.
Yeah, neck size concern.
In Vegas, sights are set high for the Raiders this season. GM Mike Mayock had this to say, quote, "We need to be a playoff team this year." Nick, is John Gruden on the hot seat this season?
Listen, I think one of the seats is hot, but I think it's probably more likely Mayock's than Gruden's. I think that Mayock has had some real disastrous moves, starting with the AB trade and some of the draft picks that in the moment were like, really? Cleveland Farrell, number 4? And they're like, no, trust me. And it's like, oh, no, we were right. Arnett went too high. A lot of those things have been curious. But that's not to say Gruden shouldn't be on the hot seat. Here's the sneaky truth about John Gruden. Unbelievable first 5 years coaching. First 5 years coaching, he was 50-30 and 5-2 in the playoffs with the Super Bowl. In the 9 years since then,